It is time on today's episode of Locked On Suns, how the Phoenix Suns capped off probably the most insane regular season I've watched this team play with a win, locked in the 6th seed, and what this game against their future opponent tells us about what's coming next. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. New intro. Faked you guys out with the old one for a second. Still getting used to it myself. I am Brendon Kleen. I am a writer at Bright Side of the Sun. No, Brandon is a writer at Bright Side of the Sun. We are all mixed up. We are all hyped. Thank you for being here. Hit follow, hit subscribe wherever you're finding the show. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. What I do, which I will get right now, is that I'm a host of the Just Basketball Show. I also create written and video content for the Locked On Suns Insiders. I will have recap videos of a watch back of at least one quarter of every game throughout the playoffs and much more. You can sign up there at the link in the show description below. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, as you can probably hear in the voice after that big win. It is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. As I said that I did, Brandon Dueñas is here. He is a writer over at Bright Side of the Sun. We are both here to talk about the Suns' 125-106 win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, which not only gets them to the 6th seed, but also knocks Minnesota down, locking in the team that they have owned all season as their first-round opponent, Brandon. We're going to start with the game. We'll get to what it means for this series that is upcoming. Why did the Suns win this game? How did they get it done, in your mind?
Well, first of all, in the words of Bradley Beal, it's time, Amanda. It's time. This team is peaking at the right time, I think defensively, which is the most important part, and that's why they won. I think their ability to pack the lane and really clog it to prevent Anthony Edwards from doing what he normally does, and that's get to the rim, combined with just more intensity on that end. I think that's really the recipe to beat this Timberwolves team. Obviously, they have the massive size advantage, and they did capitalize, but I think it just came down to the team defense clogging the lane. The last two times they played them, I think they held them at 87 points in that game earlier this month. So I think the Suns their communication on the defensive end has been a lot better, and Bradley Beal is peaking at the right time. It's just a great combination.
It's, well, first, I think it's time, Amanda. We'll see how, don't get ahead of ourselves with what this postseason run may look like. I know everybody's anxious this time of year, as I'm sure you and I both are, Brandon, but considering it led to a positive thing, whereas the other one I'm about to bring up led to a negative thing, I think it has surpassed I'm Trying Jennifer from the immortal CJ McCollum as the best phrase of effort in a basketball season, woman's name. It's a very niche category of phrase there, but Beal pulled off another one, and it's definitely going to become the mantra, I feel like, because the Suns have already posted a pre-playoffs hype video on their Instagram and whatnot, and that was the caption. So I guess we're off to the races.
If you know, you know. Love it.
Exactly. So I'm going to go with him as the reason they won, because I think he played, if you go back to Friday night against Sacramento, which I wish I could have done a podcast, but at the same time, I was content to just enjoy. I went to out to eat with my wife. We watched the beginning of the game there. Then we watched the rest of it here. I say we, probably mostly me. I didn't want to ruin that with, having to scurry out on her and not do a podcast. But that fourth quarter that he had, combined with this first quarter, that back-to-back is as good as you could possibly hope for this dude to play on both ends of the court. He had multiple blocked jump shots over that stretch. He had just a quick trigger, feel like amazing rhythm from deep, and of course the tough shot making we've come to expect over his career. He backed up the talk, right? Like, he has been that guy for this team all year with the leadership, if you want to call it that. I'll just call it energy, inspiration, motivation. And it's one thing to say that. It's another thing to deliver on the court in a big, big moment, which the Suns needed both of these games. They won them. Beal's probably, to me, the biggest reason why.
Yeah, and look, Bill Simmons, you're not off the hook. You know, the whole Landry Shamet situation this offseason, we didn't forget. Would Landry be doing this right now? According to Bill, apparently yes. And he doesn't make a difference.
I guess so. 36, 6-5 with primary defensive matchups. Something tells me no.
And along with that today, he had a little tweet that I thought was funny, and Suns Twitter jumped on and just saying, oh, the Suns are talking Anthony Edwards up X amount. Let's see how this story develops. And it developed nicely. So, but now,
yeah, you and Bill Simmons, Brandon, have something in common now, which is that Yusuf Nurkic has dunked on both of you guys. I don't know if you saw, Nurk responded to Simmons too.
Yeah,
so
that was great. I love how online he is. It's awesome. Even if I fell victim, and I stand by that trade proposal. Like I said, but I also.
What was it again? Do you want to revisit that?
Yeah, it was Daniel Gafford, who's been incredible for Dallas, and Tyus Jones for Nurkic.
Okay.
So I'll stand my ground on that. I think that would have been I like Nurkic though. So we'll move on. I think he hasn't blocked me, so I think he's still.
There you go.
We're on good terms. So
hopefully, you could have been a bigger victim. He's quick triggered like Beal from 3 with the blocks. Nurkic is so
I think
on
he's
Twitter,
but on Twitter though it's great.
Yeah, quote tweeting Dwayne Rankin the other day of that Vogel said there will be matchups where Nurk might not be able to stay on the court. Thought that was funny, and then he played 20 minutes today. That was mostly because of fouls. But okay, so yeah, I kind of want to hold on your thing with the way they guarded Ant, because to me that's where my mind is jumping on the how will this carry over side of things, which we'll get to close the show to kick off our week of previewing this series. I did want to say, though, if you want content from that Kings game, which was when Beal, again, kind of kicked off this season-saving effort here, I did do a watch back of that quarter on the Locked On Suns Insider feed, which you can sign up for at the link in the show description below, or you can visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSuns to check out. You won't be able to get that one, but I'll do one after every game down the first round here. What has impressed you most about Beal, Brandon? Because he has simultaneously, I feel like, sacrificed and stepped up, which is a weird thing to say, but I think both are true.
Yeah, I think just his aggression and like you said, his ability to step up. Like Durant was on him saying, just based off everything we've been hearing, just to be more aggressive, to look to get his shots. And right now he's starting to look like that prime Wizards Bradley Beal that is the reason the Suns made this trade. They're hoping that they'd get this version of him. Obviously, he had a pretty hellish season, and I tweeted it like I'm so happy that he's thriving and healthy at this point after all the setbacks he had early on and all the takes that were flying out there about how terrible the trade was or how this contract's just a bust at this point. And look, there's still the injury risk with any player, any great player that's going to be out there, but he's healthy and peaking at the perfect time. All three of your stars are healthy entering this series, and that's literally all you could ask for. They don't have to go in the play-in game. As terrible as this 82-game season was to watch at times, the end result is they made the playoffs. Obviously, they're going to be on the road for the first 2 games, and they're not going to have that advantage. But I think I do like this matchup against Minnesota. And if you're going to face one of those top 3 teams, they're the team that a lot of people wanted. That being said, it's definitely not going to be easy. And just because they're 3-0 in the regular season, that really doesn't mean anything. But I think there are things like we'll get into that you can take away from those games that will carry over into it. But all things considered, Beal's just been awesome, and it's great to see him looking confident and healthy. It's
funny because the Wolves game a couple weeks ago was really the one that got him out of the little rut that he was in. And you mentioned KD encouraging him to kind of shoot his way out of that cold spell, and that game was really when he did it. And the final 6 games of the regular season, he had... In that game, they won by a considerable amount. He only played 26 minutes, but 14 points on 9 shot attempts. Then he has 13 and 5 assists on 68% shooting. Clippers game, the loss, the ugly one, 19. But he had 5 blocks in that game, which speaks to the defensive uptick from him. Then he has 26, 5, and 4 on 53% shooting. Kings game, 29 and 4 with 3 stocks on 69% shooting. And then in this game, he shoots 67% from the field and has 36, 6-5 with 3 stocks. So I don't know what it was. Maybe he just needed that little kick in the butt, but he has really, like you said, peaked at the right time, as has this team. Hopefully, we'll ignore Tuesday as long as they'll allow us to ignore Tuesday, and we'll see how long we can keep the good vibes rolling. But I do think we learned something. I think we maybe not learned something. We should be impressed by what they did to beat Sacramento and beat Minnesota, do or die games if they wanted to avoid uncertainty in the play-in on the road, and they did it. They answered it. At the end of the day, the results are the results, and that's what they did. 49-win season, nothing to shake your head at. I think at the end of the day, you mentioned Beal's games played. He finishes with 53, so let's hope the curve is up. We're in the red here if we're treating the season as a stock, or I guess with a black, sorry. And this is peaking at the right time. But let's dive into some of these smaller reasons the Suns won this game. We'll continue to look forward a little bit too, and then close out with some hardcore, what actually makes this matchup what it is. Is it truly as good as it seems? And on down the line. First, today's show brought to you by the Gametime app, the best place to buy a ticket. Gametime is also now the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. So rather than, the olden days where you're perusing looking for folks who may or may not be selling tickets, Gametime has basically filled that exact void for you. So if you're maybe not the person who always plans ahead, or you're just trying to save a little money, you don't want to go through the normal avenues, I do the same thing. I love Gametime. You will too. What I love about Gametime more than anything else, I say this constantly, and it is absolutely true because I want to know everything. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. So you click on the ticket and you actually have a photo of what that view will look like up front. You also know all the pricing up front, so there's no hidden fees or anything like that, and all the deals we talked about already. Baseball, comedy, concerts, whatever you love, buy the tickets for it at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's show also brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person. I think if you listen to the podcast, the highs and lows, that's all part of it. And we all do, I think, especially as sports fans. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. I used to love Monopoly as a kid. This is basically the mobile version. It's been downloaded over 150 times. It's a great twist where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities in the process that bring you big money. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. You can charge people rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly, but you can also rob their vaults of riches for yourself, and the leaderboards show you who the biggest tycoon is, not just one head-to-head game, but over the whole app. So get in the game, join your friends, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, Brandon, let's keep it rolling. So let's touch on some of the smaller elements here of the game before we look forward too much more. I thought the biggest thing that helped decide this one is somehow the Suns made Minnesota look like the Suns from a turnover standpoint. Somehow this was one of the only games all year where the Suns not only took care of the ball themselves, but also forced a ton of opponent turnovers, and even beyond the numbers, they were forcing the Wolves into tons of those outlet pass turnovers that have made Suns fans pull their hair out all season. So maybe this was just karma, a reward after a year of what the hell is going on. The Suns finally got the right side of it.
Yeah, and I think that Denver win, too, on the road. They did a great job of doing the same thing to Denver. And then even last time they played Minnesota, they forced more turnovers than they're used to making. So I think they definitely have it in them. And obviously those are all games that have happened recently. So It's not something they're accustomed to, and that's why I said they're locking in defensively and peaking at the right time. And when you combine that with shooting 55% from three, or hitting those tough one-legged floaters or runners from Book and Durant, like some of the tough shot making today, and Beal obviously was just when the Suns are doing that and playing defense, there's not too many teams that could beat them. Like it's a very short list, and 24 turnovers a day for Minnesota. That to me is just kind of the deciding factor there, even though they got, the foul trouble and all that, and kind of beat them up inside at times and took Nurkic out of the game. When the Suns are forcing turnovers and playing that help defense and forcing, I think Naz Reid or Jaden McDaniels, like guys like that to make plays instead of their key guys, that's how you're going to beat Minnesota. So just eliminate their hubs and just force their non-playmakers to make tough decisions. And that's what they've done a great job of doing.
Yeah, I want to go to the front court for the Wolves because this was Towns' first game back. I think we have to not first game back. This was his first game against the Suns. He wasn't in that last one, and this was the first game where you could say both teams were fully healthy. And because he was still working himself back, I don't buy fully into how bad he looked at times here. 5 turnovers, 4 fouls, but at the same time, there are some who would tell you, like, that's the package a lot of the time for Minnesota with Towns. Like, he has these games in the playoffs. He has these games in big moments. But then on the other side, you had Rudy Gobert, who I thought really showed up, really put the Suns in a bind. He was the biggest reason they got back into this game after the first quarter, just finishing, drawing contact, making his free throws. So how did you feel like the Suns were able to match up with that front court? Because that's the strength of this Wolves team, and that'll decide a lot of, I think, where the series goes and just whether Minnesota's able to play its game and kind of take back control of this matchup.
Oh, it's 100% deciding the series is how they neutralize those two. I think that's what it comes down to, and I thought they did a great job by committee today of slowing them down, and Cat's shot wasn't falling. Obviously, like you said, this is only his second game back, and he's trying to get the cardio back in, get his conditioning in. So a good little ramp-up process for him before the playoffs. So I think, if you can get another game similar to this, where I think it really starts with the three-pointer. If that's not falling and he's not as confident with coming back from an injury, like there's times where I think he could be not net negative, but just not the Cat that we know, and the Suns could really take advantage of that on the other end, having two big guys that in space come playoff time, they've time and time again have been exposed. So I think when you have 3 elite scorers like Beal, Booker, and Durant that can get where they want and try to ISO those guys on an island surrounded by shooters, I think that's where you have to kind of flip it on them. And that's why I credit Frank Vogel for keeping Grayson Allen in the starting lineup, or putting it back in, even though Minnesota's a little bit bigger, just to what I've been preaching all season long, lean into your strengths. I thought they did a great job of doing that, making Minnesota adjust, and they didn't panic by trying to any supersized lineups or anything. They just kind of played their game, and the game plan just looked on point. So I think that's the best way to do it. Is you're not going to guard these guys individually because they're so different. But as a team, if you're talking, you can definitely either slow them down or just make them uncomfortable, and that's all you got to do to beat this team, really.
Credit to Grayson, too, there were a couple moments when the Wolves did cut it to 10, 11, 12, whatever, and it felt like he had a couple drives, a couple threes, and 8 of 11. He's not one of the big 3. That's not the highest point total on the team. He didn't, lock down Anthony Edwards or anything by himself, but the timeliness of what he's done, I think, has been just as big as just the production overall, the 3-point efficiency, all that stuff all season. He's just really unfazed, and given how high and low this season has been, and a lot of times the pressure on him when teams are playing off of him, it's really impressive that he's just been kind of cool-headed all season, and tonight was a great example of that again. But all right, we're already nipping at the edges of I think both of us wanting to look forward, Brandon. So we got some of the smaller stuff out of the way, Grayson Allen, the foul trouble for players, turnovers, etc. But I have 2 strategic, schematic things that I think the Suns have really made Minnesota pay for so far. And then I have a little bit of a mentality question. I don't want to declare it in one way or another, but I think it speaks to the confidence the Suns will obviously have here in this matchup. So we'll get to all three of those and a little more next.
You are Locked On.
First, today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. March is over, but the biggest moments in college basketball are wrapped up as well. The pro basketball postseason coming up soon. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks, turning $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today at Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. This is a fun time of year, even with the tournaments over. Regular seasons galore, postseasons in hockey and basketball, and Prize Picks is right there. What I love most about Prize Picks, which I've told you time and again, is I suck at most daily fantasy games. I'm not good at them. But Prize Picks, I can handle. It's not a head-to-head. It's not a league. It's not a pool. It is just you versus the projection. So you find a projection you think you have a good idea on, a player, a team you might know pretty well, put a little money down on the more or the less, and odds are you can probably get something going. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stat types, plus that awesome format all make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNBA to get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Okay, let's close it out, Brandon. So, where do you want to start? Mentality, confidence, kind of the big picture here, or the schematic stuff?
Let's start with mentality. I'm here for it.
Okay.
You know, with how passionate these last couple games have been, I think it's a good place to start.
Okay. Let me ask you this then from a Sun standpoint. Then I have a Minnesota point on the mentality side. Do you feel like that Clippers loss and almost losing again the next night, did that embarrass them worse than the other ones? Do you feel like that, what we've seen the past 2 games, the response was inspired by that, or do you feel like this was just another roller coaster week and we don't have them any more figured out than we have all season? Because that was ugly, and this has been really, really high.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't think that was the reason that this team clicked, the embarrassment. Okay. I think it was more of just kind of the status quo of this entire season, right? Is they play up and down to their competition. Their backs are against the wall, and I think they're a team that's still trying to form chemistry. Like, that's one thing we got to keep kind of reminding ourselves is, like, the big three have not had a lot of time to mesh together, and it doesn't matter how great of a player you are. Like, it takes time to learn how to play off great players. Like, even just going back to like the Miami big three with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, like, they had some struggles, and that was one of the best big three of all time. So I think kind of reminding yourself that. Also, backs against the wall, you're usually going to get that's where teams really show who they are. And I think the Suns having that pressure in a high-stakes environment is definitely encouraging. But still, now it's playoff basketball, so hopefully that just carries over. So to me, I don't think it was really embarrassment. Like Book said, they were chilling after the loss. Like I think it was just more about they just need to learn how to play up to their competition and maintain leads. Like today, that was a huge part of, I think, some growth that we could look forward to in a positive light. Is like Minnesota really wanted, they're trying to come back and win that game. They wanted that game, and every time they made a little run, the Suns answered. So that's another positive to take away.
Yeah, Chris Hine, the newspaper beat reporter up in Minnesota, had it that across all 3 games this season between these two teams, the Suns have not led by fewer than double digits for even 1 second of any of the second halves of those games. So they have literally led big time down the stretch of all 3 of these games, just to give people a little bit of a sense of how much they've owned this. And I'm going to kind of throw out the November game, but that was one of the Suns' better wins during the rocky start that they had of the season. I will say, Brandon, I'm not sure we can use the Suns' big 3 as still gelling thing much longer. They've played, like 35 games together or something like that at this point, so I guess there's no more experience they're going to get, so it kind of doesn't matter. But I think this is where they're going to get this season with those three guys, and it's a very good place to get. In terms of the confidence here, I think that's a great way to put it. As far as the confidence comes from the need, the fact that they responded in this moment. Yeah, maybe it is exactly because they had to. Maybe that's the best way to put it. But they've also, like you said, strung multiple strong fourth quarters together now, right? So it's not just tonight. It was also that game against the Clippers the other night against their C team. They went on a huge run and ends up making people who didn't watch that game probably feel like it was a lot more lopsided in the Suns' favor than it actually was. But the other part from the Minnesota side, mentality-wise here, Brandon, that I'm curious about is Naz Reid has played like garbage, I think, in all three of these games. Stat line was fine today, but he had 4 turnovers and 4 personal fouls and was a team worst, minus 17 as far as bench guys go. I don't really see any reason why that's the case, and I would say I would not count on that to continue. So that's a positive for the Wolves here as we look forward, is he's been legitimately good. He might be the 6th man of the year in the NBA, but the Suns have just gotten a bunch of bad nights from him, and I don't think that will hold up.
Yeah, and he's notoriously, I feel like he's killed the Suns in the past too, like prior to this season. So, yeah, you're going to have outlier games like that throughout. That's why you can't really, even though we have the 3-0 advantage, and like as much as I want to say it means something, it really doesn't. Everything resets in the playoffs. It's irrelevant. There's things, like little things you could take here and there, but really it's just completely different. So I think, that's something you're not going to count on, but if it happens again, we'll certainly take it.
Okay, so I agreed. I wouldn't say you can take anything from like the small statistical little things that happen in a game, but obviously teams do match up good or bad against each other, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
And to piggyback off of the Towns point we talked about a little while ago and the Nas question, one thing, and this gets us into the schematic side of it, that we saw again today, with Towns stepping in for Naz Reid in the starting lineup from last game, is they still tried to have Cat guard Grayson Allen. And we've seen this even dating back to the beginning of last season when the Suns had another big November win against Minnesota, back before the Kevin Durant trade, before Cam Johnson tore his meniscus. Yeah, it's crazy that was only like 15 months ago, but here we are. They made Cat run through off-ball screens, keep up in space, find ways to get him to switch. And they did a really good job of that today. They did a good job of that when Naz Reid was guarding Grayson Allen 2 weeks ago. And I don't know what the Wolves can do about that. I don't know what answers they necessarily have if the Suns are going to be really good and purposeful about attacking that mismatch and making Cat have to do things he's not comfortable doing. You're just getting to like part of why Minnesota's team doesn't always feel like it fits perfectly together, and the Suns are, I think, a good team to exploit that, and that's a big part of why I feel so confident.
Exactly, and my comparison, it's definitely not perfect because they're completely different teams, but just in the sense of how you want to eliminate Edwards is kind of similar pre-Durant, how the Suns were defended, like how Booker was defended because they just didn't have any other creators, like, right? There's no one else. Obviously, Chris Paul could get to his spots and hit tough shots, but like there's moments where it's just like, okay, if Booker's not doing anything, like we have to hit threes, like or Ayton has to finish like outlier numbers around the rim. Like there's ways they could win, just like Minnesota can with Gobert or Towns having great games. But I think if you could really neutralize Ant and just kind of make your entire game plan of, like I said earlier, just who else is going to create a shot? Like the Suns have 3 dudes that you could throw the ball to and then go get a bucket whenever you want. How many does Minnesota have? And who can be the best player in the series on each team? I think the Suns potentially have 3. Minnesota, they could have 3. I mean, just from an impact standpoint, Gobert could, if he has a great series defensively, could be that impactful where he offsets that. But I think just when it comes to just pure matchups, like that's why I like this matchup for the Suns. And me saying that is not by any means saying this would be an easy series or anything like that. But just in terms of the other options at the top of the West, like this to me is like who I think the Suns could really expose. And that's comes with them playing their game and hitting their shots. They're a make or miss team. It's a make or miss league. But I think even more so for the Suns that have so many shot makers. So that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, it's So it's similar to the thing we saw with Book, right? You can blitz Ant, you can, wall off his drives, you can send double teams in isolation, things to get the ball out of his hands, things for him to have to make decisions kind of in a crowd. And we've seen that. And that was the other schematic thing I was going to jump to. But the other thing that comes to mind just hearing you talk through the kind of head-to-head with this matchup, Brandon, is like even Ant himself, he's not a proven guy at all, right? Like he had one playoff series last year. He was pretty good. He had an awesome play-in game the year before that. But for the most part, I wouldn't even put Ant as like a surefire to kind of match the output of the Suns' number one guy, right? I'm not. Again, that's just more of his experience level and the way the team is built. Like he'll have some games where, tonight, right? Like 13 points on 3 of 7 from the field, 5 turnovers, only 4 assists. I don't think it'll be that bad again, but this is not the Suns catching Luka Doncic again or Giannis or Jokic, right? This is a very different group, and even their number one guy is developing still. So I think that is a huge reason why you have to feel solid, and I think it's a huge reason why they've been able to dominate this matchup so far already. And just to throw out the other guy, because I thought Jaden McDaniels took a pull-up 3 early in this game, and I was like, whoa, if they're catching him on a night where he wants to shoot the ball or something lit a fire under him and he's going to be a little more aggressive, they can be a different team. But then he shoots 2 of 7 and only has that one made 3 the whole rest of the way. They just have had a whole season now where it's pretty clear. It's going to be Ant, Cat, and Naz Reid. That's their offense, and the Suns have Beal, Durant, and Booker.
Yeah, no, that's a good point on Edwards. I love Ant. I think he's one of the brightest players in the league. Just going forward, just looking at the future of the league, but it's crazy. He's still only 22, and how is he gonna? He's gonna have to just outperform Booker and Durant almost every game for them to win this. I really do think that. Unless Cat returns to form quicker than we think, because I don't think he's 100%. Gobert, I just looking top to bottom, there's a lot of pressure on Anthony Edwards to deliver each game, and if he doesn't, I don't think the Wolves are going to win those games.
And he's guarding KD.
Yep. So and look, he could. This could be we've seen players break out in the playoffs and have their coming out parties. So it's not. I'm not sitting here. You're not sitting here either saying this. It's impossible, because he very well could. This could be the playoff run where he creates that identity for himself, but he hasn't proven it. And you have a Suns team where they have so much playoff experience and toughness. I just think. Just looking at it from that point of view too is that's advantage Suns just from the experience, and obviously they have guys like Conley and Gobert who have been there and gone through playoff battles too. But it's different when it's your top creators and the players that are going to have the ball in those key moments. So it's crazy to sit here and say that about the worst team in the league in the fourth quarter, but still true. When their backs are against the wall, and I think the Suns have better options to close out games than Minnesota does.
Yeah, it's just, a lot of the things you would say about each of these teams just haven't proven to be true in the matchups where they've played each other, right? So it's hard for me to kind of give them credit, Minnesota, for some of those things when, they haven't forced the Suns into as many turnovers as some teams have. They haven't really been able to show their defensive might against Phoenix because the offense has just kind of been too good. The Suns scored 133 and 125 against this team. I would imagine those are 2 of the higher point totals anybody scored on them all season. And then in the other game, the Suns defense was the difference maker. So yeah, it's a really good draw for the Suns, given that going into today, it was still a highly possible outcome that they would have to play either the reigning champions or the team that has had their number all season. They got the one that neither of those things are true about, and definitely the team that they would have wanted. You just try to win your own games, I feel like, is probably the moral of the story there from a shenanigans standpoint down the stretch. But all right, we will not talk again, Brandon, until the series has begun, so I'm going to make you give a pick here.
Suns in 6. They take one in Minnesota. They take out their home court. Minnesota takes one. The Suns take the last one, and it's over. It's going to be a battle, though. I'm excited. This is this is going to be there's going to be a lot of questions that will be answered after the series for both teams. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'll say Suns in 6.
I think that's going to be a very popular pick, given how the home and road will break down and everything else. I will hold mine back. I mean, people can tell I'm leaning Suns, but I want to evaluate everything. I have a crossover coming as the week continues with Locked On Wolves host Ben Beacon. I will have Stephen Perjone getting us ready for Game 1 to close out the week. Much more between now and then, getting you ready for Suns Wolves. It's time. Enjoy it. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already to join the show every day as we march closer and through the postseason. And I will catch you guys tomorrow.